Hello, my name is Keith, aka LoLByTheNumbers, and welcome to another 2014 League of Legends World Championship video analysis. Once again, this is a video analysis, not a shoutcast. There will be plenty of spoilers provided throughout the match as I talk about team strategy and particularly macro level strategy. I'll be looking a lot at macro level strategy, particularly team compositions, their win conditions, and how teams do, don't, and should be playing their teams properly to pull this off. I'll also be taking a look at objective control, map rotations, how to take down turrets, individual matchups, item choices, and the occasional individual play when these things are paramount to the win or loss of a team. For this game, we have Samsung White versus Team Solo Mid. This is going to be their third match in the quarterfinals. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into picks and bans. From Samsung White, we see the standard bans of Orianna, Lee Sin, Rumble being pulled out again. These are very strong bans against Team Solo Mid. Orianna, Lee Sin in particular. They deny TSM very strong components to their Death Ball protect the ADC compositions. The Rumble ban is just targeted at Dyrus. It's not really anything special, but it is just a decent ban. I don't think Samsung White want to really play it. On TSM side, we see generic bans of Alistar, Zilean, Maokai. Nothing really big to talk about here. What this does, though, is it creates a situation in which Samsung White pick up Kha'Zix first instead of Ryze, and this allows TSM to get Ryze and have the top lane, have one of the strong top lane trifecta champions. The trifecta being Rumble, Maokai, Ryze. So this was the choice that TSM gave to Samsung White. Take Ryze, take Kha'Zix. Also left of Thresh, that was another one of the choices. So we see TSM get two strong picks to Samsung White's one, in essence, not necessarily super strong pick, but solid pick of Kha'Zix. So I think TSM come out ahead in this situation. We see them grabbing Ryze Thresh to the Kha'Zix, and now we see Samsung White picking up Morgana Tristana. This is a little bold by Samsung White. We've seen Tristana do very bad throughout some of the group stages. And since Samsung White have already been winning so hard in the early game, I don't know why they would go with a late game champion. This is further accentuated by their last round picks of Mundo and Kassadin. Now Samsung White have a team that's entirely late game focused. They have no wave clear, no mid game power, no team synergy. So this is very cocky play. On TSM's side, we see them picking up Jarvan and Lucian as their second round picks. Very strong champions. Lucian's extremely strong against Tristana, especially with Thresh. Jarvan's just a solid jungler. Good pickup since Lee Sin is banned and Kha'Zix has been taken. Provides more power than Elise would, especially if you're going to pick a mid laner like Yasuo, who doesn't have any catch potential. So here's what we see from TSM. They get the final pickup of Yasuo. He's a decent pick in this situation. You get the knockup from Jarvan, you get the knockup from Thresh. You also get the strong power against Kassadin. So it's an okay pick. I don't necessarily know if it's the best pick, but there's nothing really great about it, nor nothing really bad about it. So it's just a nice solid pick that TSM feel they can play well with. So, having said that, let's talk about team compositions real quick. I'm probably going to do Samsung White first, then stop going to the level 1, move into Team Solo Mid after that. On Samsung White's side, we see one central theme, and this is late game scaling. There's not really anything else to say about their team other than survive until the 35-40 minute mark without incurring a huge deficit. If they're able to do this, then Samsung White will win simply because they outscale TSM's team. What this means for Samsung White, however, is that they have no mid-game power. Samsung White should lose out every fight from, say, 10 minutes until the 30-minute mark. They're going to have to make massive individual outplays to even attempt to look at fighting TSM's team in the mid game. This is very bold play by Samsung White, very cocky, overconfident team composition. On top of the fact that they're all late game focused, they have no team synergy in and of themselves. We have a little bit of mobility in Kha'Zix and Kassadin, but not so much, say, as if you were to have a Rengar or a Rengar in the jungle and then a Singed in top or something. And there's not a lot. There's no peel or protection for this Tristana either. Nobody's going to buff her up through shields. You're only getting the black shield as some sort of support to stop her from getting killed. There's nothing going for Samsung White's team. And in all honesty, Samsung White deserved to lose this game for the team that they picked up. So that's Samsung White's composition. Survive until 35-40 minute mark without incurring a huge deficit, and then win the game. What they can do to try and prevent themselves from getting this huge deficit is to look to trade objectives, since TSM is going to have the strength at turret pushes, at dragon. Samsung White should look to circumvent TSM's team whenever they see TSM going for an objective, be it dragon. Now Samsung White go to take top turret, they go to take bottom turret, they take mid turret. They constantly want to trade objectives so that they try and not fall too far behind in gold. And that took a little bit longer than I thought, so now we're into the level 1. We see TSM go for the invade, but this time they dedicate themselves to it. They go all in, they don't back off, and we see them coming out with 2 kills to 0 at the start. They have the stronger level 1 team. They have the better CC, the more AoE damage, and they properly come out with the win in the 5v5 fight at level 1. Now this nets them the 2 kills to make sure that they get the stronger lane on bottom, as well as denying Samsung White the ability to move into the 2v2s, the 1v1s, and putting them behind essentially in the jungle as well. Since Samsung White send their duo lane top, this does mean that they have control over the red buff of TSM, and so TSM are unable to get a 3 buff start, but they do secure themselves the 2 buff start, which is something that Amazing hasn't had in the previous 2 matches. So we see things going well for TSM already. So let's talk about TSM's composition. TSM's composition is pretty heavily mid-game focused, with some good solid carry potential in the end game from Ryze and Yasuo. They don't necessarily have anything amazing in terms of synergy, but their team is much stronger than Samsung White's, especially in the mid-game, and they will be able to take control of this game early. Lucian and Thresh are going to be much stronger than Tristana and Morgana throughout almost all of the game until the 30-minute mark. They'll be able to completely bully them if they're ever in the 2v2 situation. This also gives TSM a lot of strength in the mid-game dragons in the team fights early on. From Yasuo, we see that while he's not necessarily the strongest against Kassadin early on, he doesn't have anything to fear and is able to get off his free CS and then trade proper damage. And if we're watching right now, he does end up losing to Kassadin in the 1v1. This is not too big a deal, as it's easier for Yasuo to farm than it is for Kassadin. The only reason Kassadin is ahead is because he's using all his skills on Yasuo instead of on the CS. The big issue with this matchup is going to be that Yasuo hits his power spike at level 6 regardless of anything else, hits another power spike with Static Shiv, and hits a 3rd power spike when he gets his 2nd item, be it Blade of the Rune King, Infinity Edge, or Bloodthirster. Kassadin, however, has to get to his 2nd item before he gets any sort of power spike. He's going to build Catalyst, potentially Tier as well, in the early to mid game, and this is going to require him to take a good 20-25 minutes to scale up, whereas Yasuo is going to hit scaling a lot earlier on. So this is a big difference in mid lane. Same thing happens in top lane. Ryze bullies Mundo early. Ryze is also going to be able to hit his Tier of the Goddess in the 2v1, This allows him to scale throughout the match even when he's lacking in CS or in gold and experience. He's at least still scaling off of that tier of the goddess. And as we look into the match, we see that Samsung White try and take a dragon, and they have no reason to even be close to this dragon. They are fighting a 4v5, as well as not having the CC potential of TSM's team. TSM having Jarvan, Thresh, and Rise, knock up, snare, hooks, slows, 2 Samsung White's slows, and 1 snare. It's very much in TSM's favor, but Samsung White try anyways. They do steal the dragon, but it ends up with them losing 3 kills and just consolidates the gold onto TSM's side, especially on this Lucian. And he's getting a lot of gold even if TSM are losing out on the dragon. The other big thing is this is a very early dragon, so it's not worth so much gold. Stealing, say, a 15-minute dragon and maybe losing a kill or 2 for it is worth it later on, but this early on, the gold difference is not there. And since it's such a small amount of gold compared to later on, and it's spread out around your team, you don't get the power spikes you need earlier. Instead, you just kind of up your ability to get that first item by an extra creep wave, whereas the kills allow the other team to up that first item by 2, 3, maybe even 4 creep waves. So it's about the timing of power that comes from that situation. So going back to TSM's team, they are very mid-game focused, particularly in this Lucian and Jarvan. There's plenty of power, and we see how well Lucian can bully this Tristana early on. And this is something we saw several times in the group stages that didn't happen, is you would see Lucian and Tristana have similar items, but Lucian would not be diving into this Tristana to kill her, to push her off. And here's where we see TSM doing it properly. So TSM's win condition is get through the lanes, go even or ahead, transition into dragon, transition into turret pushes, take any gold advantage you gain, turn that gold advantage into objective control. Control dragon for more gold, control the neutral buffs of Samsung White. When you hit the mid-game power spike of Static Shiv on Yasuo and the first item on Lucian, move into turret pushing. Samsung White have no wave clear on their team, and it's going to be very dangerous for any of them to get up close and hit the creeps. On top of this, their only hard CC is Morgana. So what this means is that Lucian can go up to turrets at will and hit them for free damage. Every time a creep wave gets near, Lucian goes up, he just hits the turret as long as possible, waits for that Morgana binding to be launched out, then he dashes away. Wait for the next wave, rinse and repeat. This can be facilitated by Lucian picking up an early Bloodthirster, allowing him to take extra tower hits, or to take some of the poke that Kha'Zix or Mundo might be able to throw out. But there's really no worry for TSM's team. This Lucian doesn't have to be afraid of taking tower hit, of hitting the tower, and we see it right here against this Morgana. He doesn't care. He just simply goes in and dodges the binding. Ends up with Lucian being able to take the tower, and a kill coming in for TSM. So, with those team compositions talked about, going back real quick, if TSM generate a gold lead, they just need to continue to push turrets, control objectives, control the jungle, and they'll take the win, as they'll just keep growing a gold lead, and they should be able to close out the game around 25-30 minutes before Samsung White are able to even come close to their late game scaling. On top of this, as TSM grow the gold lead, that window of opportunity for Samsung White to come back gets pushed later and later. Even right now, with this large lead that TSM have, even though it's 3k gold already, if they continue at this pace, it's going to take Samsung White 40-45 minutes instead of the 30 to 35 minutes it would take if they were going even. So having mentioned a bit, I want to go back and talk a little bit of morale. I mentioned it a lot in my previous video. TSM have now got an even bigger morale boost than the last game. They've started very strong in the early game. They've already been taking the fight to Samsung White's team. TSM are actually playing their own game instead of playing into Samsung White's style. And if TSM are able to keep this up, this gives them great morale going into the next game, as well as hurting the morale of Samsung White. If Samsung White last game had simply just destroyed TSM and not played around for a while, they probably could have prevented this whole situation from happening. However, they didn't. They gave TSM plenty of time to recuperate inside of the game, to make some fun plays, to turn what should have been a very somber experience into one that actually allows TSM to laugh in these games. And that's very important in these series. So where do we go from here? This is one of those games where you just have to say that Samsung White have already lost. Rather than them being able to make plays to come back into the game, TSM, it's all about TSM winning the game at this point. Whether or not they can win or whether or not they lose the game. It's TSM's game to throw right now. Even though it's only a 3,000 gold lead, if you want to try and compare it to the mid-game power that TSM have over Samsung White, whether they have this big lull in power, it could be potentially considered something like an 8 to 9,000 gold lead if you just wanted to think of things in terms purely of gold. So this, if you think of it that way, it's very easy to see why this game is completely in TSM's hands, and that Samsung White don't really have much to do about it. If Samsung White had a team composition that they could fall back onto, they could try and revert into that strategy, be it a strong 5v5 fight, a poke composition, a split push, but instead they have nothing they can fall back on, and no way to really dictate the pace of this game. If TSM simply keep up an objective focus, if they let Yasuo continue his split push that nobody can stop him with, everything will just fall into place for TSM and they'll win. So that's going on from here, and making a video analysis about games like this is really hard, simply because you run out of things to talk about. It's a solid team composition going up against a no composition, and then when the solid team compositions get ahead, that's pretty much the end of the game. Even here, when we see Samsung White getting a kill, they dedicate 3 people to get this kill for a good 30 to 40 seconds. It means they're missing out on creep waves and gold, and though they do get the kill gold and the pressure, they're losing out on being on turret pressure in the middle. Their turret takes damage for it. We got this pressure on Yasuo in the bottom lane that they're not dealing with. They're sort of like, they're getting themselves some gold, but they're not denying TSM anything, so the gold gap still grows for TSM instead of Samsung White, even though they get the kill. So you really have to think in terms of value when you do things like that. Probably the best thing that Samsung White could even think of doing is to put all their focus into this Rise. This Rise is the only weak point of TSM's team at this point. He's done a lot to help his team get ahead. He's been involved in every single kill. His CS is just pretty low because he's been denied the 1v1 lane, as well as being picked on when he finally gets this later. We do see Samsung White are properly, they're sending Kassadin up to fight him, and this is a good move by them, is potentially Kassadin can get into that late game point and carry. And it's one of the best moves that Samsung White can make. They don't have any other options. This just falls apart when TSM decide to back off and deal with him. And it also falls apart because it's allowed TSM to take the middle turret, to take the bottom turret. And they're very ahead in terms of objective control. And this is a note I want to make about the difference, at least in the 2014 Worlds and the whole 2014 season, between North America and a lot of the Asian teams, between Europe and a lot of the Asian teams, is this objective focus. TSM are not looking necessarily for the kills right now. They're not playing Samsung White's game where they go for brawl after brawl after brawl. whereas we see last game Samsung White had something like 25, 27 kills. We won't see that in this game, and we'll see TSM focus more onto the objectives rather than onto the just getting these kills in fights. And this is, in my opinion, better play by North American and Europe teams, but we don't see it often coming into effect in the World Championship. Oftentimes we see in the World Championship teams playing the Chinese, the Korean, the Asian style instead of keeping these low kill objective focused games that are all about starving the other team and slowly whittling them down. And that's something that North America and Europe excel at. So from this point on, TSM just continue what they're doing. Rise gets his, starts to scale, gets his CS. He doesn't need to be too involved with the fights. Lucian is so strong right now that he can almost 2v1 depending on who he's fighting. Jarvan and Thresh could continue to take over the jungle of Samsung White, and Yasuo keeps up his split push as nobody can stop him. And then TSM continue to just look for opportunities. They need to draw Samsung White out into rotational mistakes. Wait for this next dragon. When the dragon comes up, TSM need to take it really quickly. They've already set themselves up to do it. They're playing properly. Once the dragon is down, now they need to move their focus into turret objectives. They have a good 13 minutes if they were going even for Samsung White to even offer them any kind of threat. And with the gold lead right now, it's probably looking more like TSM have a good 18 minutes waiting till that 35-minute mark. So they have plenty of time to make moves and keep this stranglehold on Samsung White's team. So while we wait to watch this, let me go ahead and talk a little bit about an individual matchups. I'll start at top, is where I usually do. Rise versus Mundo is an interesting fight. Rise is able to bully him early, keep him away with snares, but pretty quickly Mundo runs into the point where he can bully out Rise. He picks up a Spectre's cowl, and all of a sudden Mundo's in charge of the lane, able to sustain through anything Rise can do, as well as having much greater all-in potential, as his sustained damage is higher than Rise's once he gets on top of Rise. And here we see TSM have properly found a window. Since Samsung White are putting so much focus onto this Rise up top, that's where their power is. TSM just find the opportunity to take the turret. His Lucian is been mid properly, and something we don't often see is that the ADC needs to be the one pushing middle, because they put all the threat into that middle turret, which allows the rest of the team to take things out elsewhere. In this game, this Rise is really just being a huge decoy. So in the Rise vs Mundo matchup as well, in this situation, since we saw the 2v1, we see Mundo going for armor first. He's only got a Negatron cloak, which means he can't fight Rise. But this is a decision made by Samsung White, as they've decided to send Kassadin against Rise and Mundo against Yasuo. And this is a pretty good choice by them. They're focusing their strengths where they can, even when from behind. But they are two behind, and once again, this super scaling team, it's going to take Mundo. If Mundo wants to properly fight Yasuo, Mundo's going to need not only a Randuin's Omen or Sunfire Cape, but the Thornmail as well. It's just really bad mismatches for Samsung White's team. And while we do see that they draw TSM into this chaotic fight that Samsung White are very strong at, the skirmish potential, even though they come out ahead, TSM is still at the 6,000 gold lead. So I haven't talked about what TSM need to do to break the turret lines, but if you just watch, they have been breaking them. They have waited for opportunities through letting Rise be the decoy, through fighting this essentially 3v4 in the mid and bottom lane, and just constantly rotating through the red side jungle of Samsung White with vision control and waiting for the opportunity to take a turret. At this point, since the inhibitor turrets are the next line of defense, and because TSM don't really have solid siege potential, it's a lot harder for them to create rotational mistakes to catch Samsung White out. The benefit for them is Samsung White do not have good wave clear, so they can pressure the inhibitor turrets with Lucian to get the hits and back up, but it's going to take a while. The better option, other than pushing into the inhibitor turrets of Samsung White, is to start taking Baron control. And the way you take Baron control is through dedication. Get several pink wards, block off all lines of vision with these pink wards, move through Samsung White's blue side jungle using your sweepers to clear out their vision, use green wards to take control of this, then wait. If you can prevent Samsung White from being able to move into their own jungle or into the Baron area for a good 3 minutes, then you will have guaranteed that Samsung White have no vision in the Baron pit. This allows you to go make Baron baits or Baron plays. And so if you dedicate yourself to this, you can pretty much guarantee that you have the opportunity for one of these two things. And we see as TSM attempt to do this, they are able to catch out Samsung White. They get 2 kills for nothing, and then they back off to heal. And this is the proper play. And they need to rinse and repeat this. Eventually, TSM will get enough gold that they can simply dive, or they will get the opportunity to take Baron, which will then allow them to dive onto the turrets of Samsung White. Moving back to Samsung White's side, what they can do at this point is, once again, it's not much. They're at the mercy of team compositions, and they've allowed themselves to be at the mercy of team compositions. They can attempt to wave clear with Kha'Zix and Tristana. Tristana really should have gone for her static shiv first instead of for this infinity edge. Samsung White needed that wave clear. They needed to be able to keep TSM back. Without that static shiv, it really hampers Samsung White's ability to survive. And when we go back to the Baron control, the vision control of TSM, we do see them having the opportunity to take it out because they have pushed Samsung White so far back. It is a little bit risky. Samsung White did have vision of it, but with TSM being so far ahead, by forcing Baron, they draw Samsung White into a fight that TSM know they can win. And this is another way you close out games as a mid-game team, especially against a team who takes so long to scale as Samsung White. Even with Baron attacking you, if Samsung White had come in for the fight, TSM peels, and they can potentially win the fight. Even if TSM don't win the fight, they get several kills, and they kill enough of Samsung White's members that Samsung White can't do Baron either. So it's more like something like a 75-25% chance that TSM can peel off and find the right fight, or that they get Baron, with a 40-60% chance in Samsung White's favor if they can sneak into the Baron and attack TSM in the pit. So the risk/reward is all in TSM's favor, whereas if they do fail, they're still sitting on the gold lead and the power lead. So it's not all that dangerous of a play. I would like to talk about how Samsung White could extend this game, how they could come back into it, but there's really nothing to say about it. Without solid wave clear, they can't defend. Without any proper pick potential or catch potential, they can't look to fish for TSM's members and kill them out. Without a better 5v5 team at the moment, they can't just simply engage. There's no options for Samsung White's team, and that's just the way the cookie crumbles when you pick a quadra late game scaling team. The only shining light for Samsung White at this point, with a 10k gold deficit, would be that TSM decide to not close out the match until 45-50 minutes. So TSM essentially have 25 minutes to mess around if they wanted to. But smartly of them, we will not see this. So looking at items, let's take a look at Jarvan. I really like how Jarvan went into this Aegis as his second item after grabbing the Locket of the Iron Solari. You do need a little bit of HP, but this Aegis is a really strong pickup. Blocks a lot of damage from Mundo, blocks Kassadin, blocks Morgana, blocks the burst damage from Tristana, as well as a decent amount of the poke damage from Kha'Zix. It's just an all-around solid pickup, and it's great for dives, as it gives your entire team that shield to take a hit or two. Much like to see Aegises and Lockets being picked up by junglers instead of Banshee's Veils or Spectre's Cowls when the other team is running double AP. It just gives a lot more ability to your team while providing near similar defensive values for yourself. So this is, in my opinion, almost always the superior pickup to Banshees or Spectre's Cowl. You just have to coordinate with your support as to what they're getting and how well they are doing in the game. So as TSM siege up, I'll talk a little bit about the situation where you have two inhibitors down. It's a very simple situation. Anytime you're able to take two inhibitors down from the other team, essentially you win the game. What this means to you is that you're going to have two lanes of super minions pushing into the opponent's team. The opponent has to deal with them. And more often than not, they have to deal with these super minions with two champions. This means you're going to get at least a 5v4 at the final inhibitor, potentially even a 5v3. When this happens, you either just go straight for the turret, take it out, or you dive and kill off members of the other team. At no point should you ever be impatient with this. Always wait for the other team to send a member back to deal with the super creeps. We've seen a couple games in the group stages, particularly from Fnatic, where they could have won the game with two inhibitors down, but got impatient and didn't wait for their super creeps. So that's this match. If you're going to take away anything, never pick a triple or even quadra hyperscaling team. You always need some sort of backup in the mid game, or you need some sort of solid wave clear, ways for you to protect yourself and draw a match out. If you're not running wave clear, if you have no mid game focus, then essentially you're saying beat me by the 30-minute mark, and that's what TSM did. TSM got a gold lead. They had the power spikes, and they never stopped push. They didn't stop pushing. They took the game to Samsung White, and there was nothing Samsung White can do about it. It's bad, over-cocky team composition, and in the next game, they just need to change that up. So once again, the notes for this match can be found below, as well as the link to all of my 2014 League of Legends World Championship video analysis and notes portal page. I'm Keith, aka LoLByTheNumbers, and thanks for watching.